Right now, across Spain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands, meteorologists are looking at a summer that has already rewritten the record books twice, and they are telling anyone who will listen that the danger is nowhere close to finished. In June of this year, Western Europe recorded its hottest June since record-keeping began, according to the Copernicus Climate Change Service, the European Union's own climate monitoring body. The Netherlands broke its national June temperature record at just under 39.5 degrees Celsius. Denmark set a new all-time national high. Spain's Fabra Observatory in Barcelona, a station with more than a century of continuous data behind it, recorded over 40 degrees Celsius in early July, the hottest reading in its entire historical record. If you have felt like this summer's European heat, coverage arrived, spiked, and then quietly vanished once temperatures eased, here is what almost nobody is explaining clearly enough. The records broken in May and June were not an isolated event the continent has safely moved past. They were the first two chapters of a pattern scientists say is actively rebuilding heading into August, driven by an ocean holding more heat than it has in generations. This is the story of what the data actually shows happened this summer, why scientists are still worried rather than relieved, and what is already forming over the Mediterranean right now. No hype, no exaggeration, just what the Copernicus, World Weather Attribution, and World Meteorological Organization data actually says. If you are in Europe, drop a comment and tell me what this summer has felt like where you live, because the numbers behind it are more serious than most coverage has treated them. I read every one of these. If you want grounded climate coverage built on the actual data instead of recycled panic, subscribe. It is free. An A-like helps this reach people who need to understand this before the next heat dome arrives. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Thank you. Now let us get into it. To understand why scientists are still worried after the immediate danger appeared to pass, you first need to understand what actually built this summer's heat, because it was never simply hot air sitting still. It started with a heat dome, a large, stubborn zone of high pressure that traps warm air beneath it like a lid on a pot, blocking the cooler air in storms that would otherwise break the heat up. This one formed in an unusually specific way, drawing air directly north from the Sahara Desert and settling it over Western Europe behind what forecasters describe as a classic omega block, a jet stream pattern shaped like the Greek letter it is named after, with a ridge of high pressure locked in the center and two areas of low pressure anchored on either side, one over the North Atlantic and one over Russia. That shape matters because an omega block does not simply pass through the way most weather systems do. It parks itself, sometimes for weeks. Underneath that atmospheric lid, the ocean was doing something equally unusual. Sea surface temperatures across the extrapolar global ocean reached the highest levels ever recorded for June, according to Copernicus, and the western Mediterranean and Atlantic coastlines specifically were sitting inside full-blown marine heat waves, meaning the water itself, not just the air above it, was running dangerously far above its seasonal norm. The scale of what that combination produced is where the actual record numbers come in. The 2026 heat season began early, with a historic spring heat wave in late May pushing temperatures 10 to 15 degrees Celsius above normal, including a peak of just over 40 degrees Celsius in Mora, Portugal, on the 27th. By late June, the far more severe wave arrived. Andujar in Spain recorded above 45 degrees. France recorded over 44 in the town of Pissos. Germany logged a provisional national record above 41. The UK's Met Office issued red warnings for extreme heat on consecutive days for the first time in the history of its current warning system, a detail meteorologists flagged as unprecedented. Copernicus confirmed Western Europe's average June temperature came in at just over 20 degrees, more than 3 degrees above the 1991 to 2020 average, surpassing the record, only just set the year before. That is not a single hot afternoon. That is an entire month running further above its baseline than any June ever measured for that region. What happened next is the part of this story that turns a dramatic weather event into a genuine public health emergency, and it is the reason scientists have stayed vocal well after the temperatures eased. World Weather Attribution, the international scientific collaboration that includes researchers from Imperial College London and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, conducted a rapid analysis of the June heat event and concluded that a heat wave of this intensity would have been, in their own words, virtually impossible without human-caused climate change. Separately, mortality. Data compiled by Euromomo, the European Mortality Monitoring Network backed by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control and the World Health Organization, recorded more than 10,000 excess deaths across Europe during the June heat waves, with the overwhelming majority, more than 9,000, occurring among people aged 65 and older. A separate, not yet peer-reviewed statistical estimate from a climate scientist at Indiana University Bloomington, placed the toll considerably higher at just over 20,000 deaths during the single worst week alone, concentrated most heavily in France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. Those two figures are not identical, and the second has not gone through formal scientific review, which is worth stating clearly rather than blending the numbers together. But both point in the same direction using different methods, and both land in a range public health researchers consider catastrophic for one summer on one continent. The reason scientists say this is not over comes down to what is happening beneath the surface of the Mediterranean right now, the least visible part of this entire story. The Mediterranean Sea is warming at roughly 20% faster than the global ocean average, according to the scientific panel MEDECC, which tracks environmental change across that basin, making it one of the fastest warming seas on the planet. That excess heat does not sit there quietly. It acts as a reservoir, feeding warmth and moisture directly into the atmosphere above it, which is precisely why forecasters are already watching a new heat dome rebuild over the Iberian Peninsula in France as July turns into August, with high-resolution models showing thermal anomalies in the upper atmosphere tracking into the 99th percentile, a threshold meteorologists reserve for genuinely historic events. The World Meteorological Organization's seasonal outlook for August through October tilts the odds toward warmer than normal conditions across Europe, with forecasters flagging the strongest, most confident heat signal sitting directly over the Mediterranean and southeastern Europe, including Iberia, Italy, Greece, and the Balkans. Meteorologist Ioana Vergini, founder of the forecasting platform WFY24, told Euronews that the exceptionally warm Mediterranean is leaving its fingerprint on land increasingly at night, with early August forecasts showing cities, including Naples, Barcelona, Rome, Valencia, Nice, Thessaloniki, Split, and Athens failing to drop below 20 degrees Celsius even after sunset. That nighttime detail is not a minor footnote. It deserves the same weight as the daytime record numbers, because it is precisely the mechanism researchers say turns a hot week into a deadly one. Human bodies rely on cooler nights to recover from daytime heat stress, particularly older adults and people with cardiovascular conditions. And when overnight lows stop dropping for days in a row, that recovery window disappears entirely. To be honest about the limits of the current data, this is not a guarantee of an exact repeat of June's numbers. Seasonal models can identify the broad pattern, a warmer than normal Mediterranean corridor with elevated risk of another blocking heat dome, but they cannot pin down the precise date, duration, or peak temperature of a specific late summer heat wave more than a handful of days out, and forecasters are explicit about that uncertainty. What they can say with confidence, and what a 2025 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences documented, is that the broader category of atmospheric blocking patterns responsible for both heat domes and stalled flooding events has nearly tripled in frequency in recent decades, meaning the mechanism behind this summer is not a one-off anomaly, but part of a measurably accelerating trend. Behind every one of these percentages and temperature anomalies is a version of ordinary daily life that has quietly become far more dangerous than it used to be. It is an elderly resident in a Paris apartment building with no air conditioning in a country where most homes still do not have it, trying to get through a fourth consecutive night above 20 degrees Celsius. It is a farmer in Extremadura, watching soil moisture readings that were already low before June's heat arrived, now facing another month of the same pattern as harvest approaches. It is emergency room staff across Spain, France, and Germany who spent late June managing a mass casualty event spread out over weeks rather than hours, precisely the kind of slow-moving disaster that rarely generates the same urgency as a single dramatic headline, even though the World Health Organization's Director General has been explicit that this kind of heat is now a leading cause of weather-related death on the continent, ahead of storms, floods, and every other extreme weather category combined. So what does this actually mean for you, whether you are in Europe or watching this pattern from somewhere else entirely? It means treating the phrase, "the heat wave is over," with real skepticism for the rest of this summer, because the specific conditions that produced June's records, an unusually warm Mediterranean, a persistent blocking pattern aloft, and a strengthening El Niño event reinforcing both, have not resolved. They have simply shifted focus slightly south and east toward Iberia, Italy, Greece, and the Balkans, exactly the region the world. Meteorological organizations' seasonal outlook flags as the highest confidence area for above normal heat through October. If you live in or are traveling to that corridor, the practical takeaways public health researchers have repeated all summer are worth taking seriously now, not after the next red warning. Check on older neighbors and relatives directly, keep homes cool during the hottest hours rather than relying on evening ventilation when nights are not actually cooling down, and treat heat alerts with the same urgency as a storm warning, because the data increasingly says the risk is comparable. The honest, grounded summary of this story is this: Europe just recorded its hottest June on record according to Copernicus, driven by a Sahara-fed heat dome locked in place by an omega block and amplified by record warm. Sea surface temperatures across the Mediterranean and Atlantic. World Weather Attribution concluded that heat of this intensity would have been virtually impossible without human-caused climate change, and European mortality monitoring data recorded more than 10,000 excess deaths during the event, a large majority among people over 65. That heat did not fully dissipate so much as relocate its energy, source into an already overheated Mediterranean, and the World Meteorological Organization is now flagging a renewed risk of significant heat across Iberia, Italy, Greece, and the Balkans through October, with high-resolution models already showing a new heat dome rebuilding as August begins. None of this means a specific repeat heat wave is guaranteed on a specific date. It means the mechanism responsible for this summer's records is still fully active, not resolved, and scientists tracking it are treating this as an ongoing event rather than a closed chapter. We're going to keep tracking this pattern exactly the way we tracked it today, straight from Copernicus, the World Meteorological Organization, World Weather Attribution, and the researchers publishing this data in real time, not recycled headlines dressed up as a new story. Subscribe so you do not miss how this Mediterranean heat signal develops over the coming weeks, because based on everything the seasonal data shows, this story is not finished. And leave that comment below. Tell me if where you live has already felt this shift firsthand, because that lived experience is exactly the pattern this video has been explaining, and it is worth understanding now before the next warning covers your city. 5,000 likes on this one. Let us go. See you in the next one.